next session, which is from the research to the action on the ground, which is the most important part. So with the NCCI, we have got a really good combination of academic researchers, we have got people from the government agencies, that is the forest department, and we have got a lot of civil society organizations who are actually working on ground. And there's a dearth of information available. There's been a lot of research being done, and it is very, very required to translate all those research onto the actionable points on the ground. And on that note, I would like to invite our first speaker over here, that is Schoen. He's a Columbia University PhD student, and he's been working on the consensus corridor network. So, Jay, over to you.
All right, so thank you so much for that introduction. And really, like I said, it's a true pleasure to be here. It's the landscape that I've dreamed of visiting for a long time, so thank you for having me. And I'll keep my talk brief. As Mandar mentioned, we really want to spend some time to get into the outreach efforts that result in this really important and collaborative research. And so, as many of you probably know, this idea was actually hatched right here, not right here in Kanha, but right here at CILS 3 in Melgat in 2019. So the NCCI connectivity group got together with the idea for this project, so we're really excited to show you how far we've come since that time. So as a lot of research effort went into understanding how tigers have remained genetically connected throughout central India, this connectivity group thought, what can we make the best use of all this great research for? How can we present this in the most clear way to decision makers and stakeholders on the ground? And the authors of these 5 studies in particular agreed to share their data with the collective goal of synthesizing these studies to produce this kind of product. So our primary question here was to understand how well these existing tiger connectivity studies align. And we looked at this through 3 perspectives. We want to know how the landscape resistance or the suitability line up. We also want to know how potential movement might align between these studies. And then of course understand the stakeholders on the ground, both the decision makers and the people who might be affected by any decisions in this landscape. So you can see the extended landscape of the 5 studies here, the protected areas within our landscape, and the various overlays here with this gray area was our central study area that we made in the landscape. So first looking at landscape resistance. When we put all these studies in the same color scheme and everything, you look here, first of all, resistance to tiger movement is shown low resistance in blue, high resistance in red. So you can see these maps all look really different at first, and that's not great for a really clear message for people on the ground. And so by doing some various analyses, and again, I'm keeping this brief, feel free to approach me after for any technical questions, we wanted to understand where these studies actually agree. So we looked at it in a little bit different way and could understand that as we had increasing agreement here, so going from left to right, as agreement on these pixeled landscape increased, we had more percentages of either settled or forested land covers, so kind of the traditional high resistance or low resistance land covers. But we had much less agreement in the areas like agricultural areas and scrub forest areas. So where we'd expect there to be a little bit less agreement on how different studies would portray these types of landscapes in their studies. And also just it points to the importance of understanding more about how tigers utilize these parts of the landscape. So finally looking at connectivity here, our major layer we came out with here is called a consensus connectivity area. So when we simulated movement over all of these studies, we were able to pull out these areas in particular where all 5 studies agreed that there was a relatively high level of predicted movement in these areas. So this is our final layer, or our CCAs. And I just want to take a minute to say that this layer is really ripe for next steps at the management level. And one aspect of this is to validate it with data from tigers on the ground. So if anyone has anything from scout analysis to camera trap photos, telemetry, we would love to collaborate more and bring more people on board with this project. And it's just a really important part of all of our next steps here. That's all the time I'm going to take today. I just want to thank you so much for letting me be here. And a lot of us are here today. Like I said, I worked on this project. It's been a really amazing collaborative effort. So please don't hesitate to reach out to anyone here. And we look forward to the next steps for this and how we can establish more consensus in this area for next steps in outreach as well. All right. Thank you. And now right into Amrita.
One of the main things is, of course, that's the people landscape. All of you have already probably seen some version of this slide. You know how many villages there are, you know some patches are less populated, some patches are more populated, but largely there are people everywhere. So that's one big constituent or one big stakeholder that we would like to approach with our results, work with our results, figure out what life in a corridor means if you're one of these villages. The other thing is, of course, that the corridors have villages in them. There's also the fact that the forest department jurisdiction itself overlays with these villages in places as well. So it's not just the complexity of there are people, there's corridors, but also who's managing these corridors. They have to work with those people as well. And then that's sort of like looking at it in a more grainy way. You can't really tell the lines very well on here, but this is down to like the beat and compartment. That overlap is not just at the division level, it's all the way down inside the village. And then how human dominated? It's pretty human dominated. You can't really see this very well, but the idea is that the village population is higher densities outside corridors, but that doesn't mean within corridors there's no people. It's just that there's a low density of people right through. And outside, of course, it's getting more and more dense. This again is just talking about the complexity even within the jurisdiction of the managers. So there's the corporate side of forestry, there's the territorial departments, we've talked a lot in other collaborations about how corridor management stems from PA nodes, but really lives in the territorial division. Some of that came up in the last talk as well from like Achanakmar Forest Department about how 90% of their land is more to do with forestry and 10% is very core jurisdiction. So it's really complex, there's a lot of people, and which is why outreach is such a huge thing for us. The other problem is, of course, that a lot of the remaining lands that get diverted for development come from forest land. So the CCAs sort of track forests, and so those little CCA blocks are the remaining forest in this setup, but those are the first patches of land that go for roads, rail, any sort of development. And we know this happens over and over, we know it's certainly happening in Bangladesh and Maharashtra. Large portions of land go, and this is tracked. If you've seen the work of LIFE, legal, I'll say the full form of the acronym, but they collate all of this information year on year. There we go. So, Legal Initiative for Forest Management. Thanks, Patrick. So the idea is that you can track these diversions, but they most often happen on forest land, so there's an added layer of threat to these remaining CCAs. And just to sort of look at what that spread of infrastructure looks like, the roads cross across most CCAs, there's upwards of 5 crossings. Rails are slightly less dense, there's lots of transmission, there's probably more transmission coming up, and there are mines as well. And the mines we sort of looked at around in buffers. The paper is open access. If you haven't read the paper, please go find it. It was a huge undertaking. It took us many years, the pandemic, and too many Zoom calls, but we finally got it. And I think everyone here knows how it started. It started very organically, and then we got to the cycle of meetings and getting it done. We've also been thinking about what we do with results, right? So some of the things that we've done is we've spoken to people about it, we've gotten some press out, all of that. But really we started working with Biodiversity Collaborative about outreach. And I think I would love to go there next, and that should be the mainstay of what this particular piece of next step will be. So I would like to hand it over to Aunindo and Aditi, if that's fine with you, Mandar. Yeah.
So as the name suggests, we are really a collaborative of organizations who deeply care about biodiversity, and most importantly, it's links to human well-being. That's what brings us together. You'll see the organization name. Many of these organizations are represented here today. We have people from A3, Metastream Foundation, NCBS, IHS, and so on. And it's a growing set of institutions. So over the lunch, I was talking to somebody and said, we want to be also part of it. So there's an open invitation to be part of the collaborative as well. What we are focusing on at the moment are really 3 key things. The first one is pilots for core programs of the mission. When I say mission, what we are trying to do is we are trying to work with government to launch a mission called National Mission on Biodiversity and Human Wellbeing. So it's a proposed mission, and we are currently doing some pilots about it. I'm going to talk about the mission in a moment. The second important thing is really public engagement on biodiversity and human well-being. That's what brings us here today. And last but not the least, we do a lot of work on policy reform and advocacy because there is a need for it, as we heard in the first plenary session. Now, talking about the mission, this is really one of the long-term initiatives that we are working towards. When we say there's a national mission, this is the proposed one, and we want it to be, or at least we hope it is at the scale of things like national NRLM or national literacy mission. Through this, what we are trying to do is really unlock public fund, work with government so that long-term, large-scale investment can happen on biodiversity, not for the sake of biodiversity, but also human well-being, right? And when I say this is really taking a step back, we are not just talking about wildlife, we are talking about biodiversity in its entirety and our relationship with it. So this proposed mission has multiple programs. What we are trying to do is really bring in elements like agriculture, bioeconomy, health, well-being, climate change and disaster mitigation, all of this into the umbrella of this mission to see how these aspects can really help us, and through this, if we can conserve and augment biodiversity, then that's a win-win situation. That's what we are trying. And all these programs actually feed into a very ambitious project called Nisarg Bharat Mission, or Nisarg Bharat, wherein all the data, analysis, knowledge, insights from this gets into a centralized place which can be used for research and action. And this is cataloging and mapping the life of entire India, right? It's flora, fauna. Now, the current status of this has got an in-principle approval, in quotes, from Ministry of Finance. That's a good thing, but that's not enough. There is a slip between the cup and the lid. And a mission of this scale takes its own time. Multiple ministries have to come together. Budgeting needs to happen for the first time and then in a sustained way. So all of that we are trying in the background. But the mission might launch this year or next year, we don't know. It might get launched in slightly different form. That is, parts of missions get launched. But irrespective of that, what we are doing is we said, look, we came together not just for the mission, we came together because we believe in something. And that's what we are trying to do, irrespective and in addition to what we are doing with the government. And that's the three things that we are talking about here. Thankfully for this, private philanthropies have come together. So we are currently funded by Neelakantan Philanthropies. And in this year, 2 more funders are coming together to really take this forward till the time government actually decides to put in money. We started with government funding and hopefully we'll get it, right? Now, the first program is very important. It's called Pilot for the Core Missions. We have chosen aspirational district to start. The idea is, let's take the places where this is most needed. So we have chosen 2 districts. First one being Raichur, which is really, it's a degraded landscape in many ways, degraded ecosystem, the soil quality is really low, and it is one of the lowest in India on human development indicators. Lowest in Karnataka, it ranks 30th out of 31 districts in Karnataka, in very high incidences of malnutrition, pregnancy, anemia. So we said, okay, this is our opportunity to really bring in multiple programs into that one location and see can biodiversity augmentation and conservation really move the needle on the ground. Morning somebody talked about importance of education, so that is where we started. We did a pilot over the last 8 months with 600 children on biodiversity education in an experiential way, through activities. So we took them out, we learned about biodiversity to plant diversity, we did bird diversity, medicinal plants, how that can help us, and through all of this, really talk about the importance of conservation and augmentation. That's the way we believe public engagement should happen. It should not be wildlife for the sake of wildlife and biodiversity for the sake of biodiversity. We also did another very interesting program called Environment as a Shared Space, wherein we took out the children into, out and really talked about the fact that we are not on top of this ecosystem, we are all part of a web of life, and that was very interesting for them. The other project we are doing is restoration of about 300 acres, 117 hectares of land, which is both in the commons and the public private domain in Raichur district. This is for improving the soil quality and also livelihoods. So biodiversity augmentation is happening. At the same time, it's also really catering to the needs of fodder and agriculture. And the third thing really came from an aspiration study and study we did on the ground, where when we spoke about biodiversity, they said, yes, biodiversity, but then we need health, nutrition related work. That's what the local CSOs on the ground said. So we started a project for kitchen gardens. So 140 kitchen gardens across 35 villages, working with the women SHGs, which would hopefully cater to the food basket and make it more diverse. So biodiversity in the backyard through kitchen garden. We are also partnering with TDU to bring in medicinal plants into that patch so that preventive health and primary health care can be partially met through biodiversity-based medicines. So the idea is any disease that can be cured within 72 hours, we should be able to get most of the stuff from the backyard. So that's what we are doing in Raichur and now in West Sikkim. That is again an aspirational district, but very different realities there. There we are working on agrobiodiversity and impact of so-called ecotourism on biodiversity. And our idea is to really expand to multiple sites and show that in one place, if we bring in multiple expert research scientists, CSOs together, we can move the needle in a way which makes sense for people and also biodiversity. That's the idea. The second one is also very important. We call it Policymakers Program. I talked about the national mission. So there is a need to work with multiple ministries to really get biodiversity as a word into their dictionary. With the health ministries, environment ministries also, and many other ministries. So we are doing policy briefs, reports, booklets, etc. Also, we realize there's a lot of information fatigue. Everybody is going and giving a brochure or a research paper. So we are trying to break the mold by creating games and simulations on biodiversity and how it relates to their ministry and their work. So hopefully that would stay with their hearts, if not mine. And lastly, we are also we are a research organization-led collaborative. So there is that element very strongly, and that also should translate into policy recommendations. So in the morning, we heard about Wildlife Protection Act, so there's an amendment. Biodiversity Act, there's an amendment. So we are coming together as a team to really give our policy recommendation. And here lies really the strength in unity and the diversity, because as one organization to give a very strong opinion to the government is okay, but probably what's better is if we come together as multiple organizations as a platform to really say what needs to be said. So that's the angle on policy. And the third part is probably most relevant, which is public engagement, where we are again trying to go a little unconventional way through art-based communication, societal platform, and obviously media engagement. And it's important to mention that while a lot of our work is happening in aspirational district, we basically work pan-India beyond aspirational district, and that is where we partner with organizations and take important projects from member organizations and really add the public engagement layer on top of it. And that's where NCPS came in and Uma came in and Ruth and Amrita, and that's about really the collaboration that we are doing with NCCI. But I would want to invite Aditi, who leads our communication and public engagement initiative, just to give a glimpse of what we are doing in other fields and then bring it back to really the connectivity. Thank you.
Thanks, Aunindo. So basically, I'm going to unpack what public engagement looks like at Biodiversity Collaborative. So these are three critical components which are also part of our public engagement strategy at the collaborative. First is art-based communication. So we've realized that we really need to go beyond the traditional ways of communication. That's why we're exploring and experimenting with new forms of media. So we work with a lot of artists and a lot of talents to basically do a different kind of talking to touch people's hearts. And so far, within like a year or so, we have produced 2 stop motion animation films. For example, we've made this film called Kyaari with Pollen, which talks about pollinator diversity and its role in nutrition security. And it has had a good uptake with schools, teachers. They're also translating it in other languages. Another film that we recently came up with is called Blue Mountain Blues. It basically tells about the Nilgiris water story and how every human-wildlife interaction need not be mired into conflict, and it's a real-life story. So that's another way of doing some education and entertainment at the same time. And one of our another collaborative effort has been with Neelakantan. It's called Mapping Invasive Alien Plants. So it's a pilot platform nationwide where they're trying to build an atlas of common or invasive plants across India. So what we did, we took it on an online campaign form. We did this campaign called Guests Who Never Left, where every week, if you follow Biodiversity Collaborative, we've been talking about every common invasive plant and its impact on the ecosystem, good or bad, and also linking it with local ecology and livelihoods. So that's one way of doing a campaign. Another critical component is digital societal platforms, which is pretty much the center and front of our strategy, how to crowdsource data and really move citizen science forward. And we are doing this through a flagship program called India Biodiversity Portal. We're also trying to revamp the portal. It's one of the oldest portals. And what we're also doing on ground, basically in Raichur, is doing biodiversity mapping and layering it with the other works happening in Raichur, like the kitchen garden project and the restoration project. Third is our media engagement. So we have a lot of good researchers on board who do a lot of popular science writing. So we're trying to enter the mainstream media, but also niche platforms to talk about biodiversity. For example, why monkeys is bad for forests. Also talking very much about the cheetah problem that's happening in the country. So that's our way of doing some sort of media engagement. And so far we've produced more than 25 media articles. So basically what's common and lies at the heart of our interventions is collaboration. We don't do anything alone. It's a small team, but everything that we've done so far has been in collaboration with really, really wonderful people. And one such recent collaboration has been with the NCCI team, and it's been lovely working with them. And today I'm proudly launching the campaign that we started with them. It's called Bakchal, Traversing the Heart of Central India. So if I'm to trail back to the story of how it all started, I mean, you read about the paper, they spoke about the paper, so the real obvious question was what to do with this paper, I mean, how to translate action on ground. And the paper also indicates that people need to talk, different stakeholders need to talk, but how do you make them talk through creative, interesting ways, right? So you really need to have a strategy in place. So our team kind of took the challenge to translate the paper into, engagement on ground. And that's how we thought we'd keep the momentum going on. And we basically started, like in any engagement plan, we started mapping the real audiences, and we came up with 4 sets of primary audiences: the tiger conservation stakeholders, people stakeholders, basically tribal welfare departments, line departments, development stakeholders, both public and private, who are building infrastructure in the corridors, and also on-ground scientific staff, right? There are a lot of GIS specialists, a lot of biologists working in these parks. So how can we actually provide easy information which can help them talk about this issue further? So we phased out the engagement plan in 2 phases, where the phase 1 basically talks about understanding the complexity of the corridors and how do you appreciate this complexity and work around it. And as part of understanding, we are going to really break down the science into comprehensive outputs. So one of the ways is to do through visual communication. And the second phase is basically to doing some deep listening with all the stakeholders and then design tools with them. So that it's co-creation. And it's not something that we're making sitting in Bangalore. So today what we're releasing is a visual communication product which we have come out with a very talented person that you all must know. It's Sudarshan. And you guys might know him, but I would like to take the opportunity to introduce him. So Sudarshan is a storyteller at heart, he's a graphic artist designer, and he practices this art form called folk indica, which very integrates the wild, the land, and the culture together. And most of you who follow him on Instagram or on other platforms must know that he does really wonderful work, and we thought he's the best man to take this thing forward. So I would like to call Sudarshan so that he walks you through the poster, but I also want to invite Ruth and Ravi to unveil the poster.
Gotta come down a bit. Yeah. Just kidding.
Is that okay?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely. Gorgeous. Well done.
So if you see, the main thing that we visualize from this is the trail of a tiger. There are 4 pug marks of a tiger traversing through the page, and which contains all the stories of it, basically. So if we look to the lower bottom left, we see the 4 prominent tribes and the habitat that they live in, which is present in central India. So we have tribes like Gon, Bega, Korku, and Parthi. I'm very fortunate to have been able to interact with all of them, and most importantly with Bega and Korku tribes in Melghat and in Kanha. And when we see the center of the map, this has already been explained in detail by my friends before me. So it's all about the movement of the tiger, which we call Bak Chal, and it's basically the journey of a tiger traversing the heart of India, and we can see the prominent protected areas within the map, the area of research that this team does, and also the 4 prominent pressure points that the journey of a tiger has to feed. So which are like mines, railways, roadways, and urbanization. I'm not taking ahead at all these 4 activities, but anything beyond a certain point actually creates a problem. So that has been highlighted over here. And to the top we see a pug mark as it is, and to the right a unit, a pug mark, which is shown here as a compass. And coming to the left and right of the artwork, so to the left we see a cross-sectional representation of a tiger's movement from one habitat to another, to the right also. So this has been inspired by the imagination, abstraction, and a bit of hallucination of the Gond art and the Gond people. Right. So in one frame we can see a tiger looking for a male tiger looking for a potential female tiger for mating, and the activities that he has to go through. And to the right, the same thing, a tiger is looking for a healthy food. So this is the food here. And yeah, so we all know that when we talk about folk art is a visual language, right? So like verbal languages, visual languages also travel and change from places to places, from countries to countries and regions to regions. So we all know how art helps scientific research reach a wider audience, and so it even reaches furthermore, deeper down, when it's presented in a native way, in a native folk language. So the reason is the native people relate to it as they have been practicing it for a long period of time, and they know the ups and downs of it. So more so in the field of communication, communication of conservation in India, folk visual language actually helps. The folk art, the native art actually helps, because it talks about the real stakeholders of conservation, who are the native people, who have in store the wisdom, the ancient wisdom, and all knowledge that would eventually help us solve modern day problems related to conservation. And lastly, the style that you see over here, it's a style that I innovated, which was inspired by the native folk art forms of India, by taking clues from various folk arts of various regions in India. As you know, India is too diverse, so all the colors and forms and everything has been taken, and a folk art style has been created, which I call folk indica, which can be localized as well as universalized. So when we're talking about folk indica, it's also like this art style is also like a jungle. It doesn't have a definite shape or a definite color to it. So this is the reason I went ahead with this style. Also, having many such projects thriving onto the field, I can see that they are working critically on two fronts, which is reception by the people and representation of the people, which eventually forwards them, which gets them dignity. Their contribution is also highlighted through this. So this is the result of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudarshan. And Sudarshan has worked on multiple projects in this area. So he has worked on Kerala, elephant corridors, biodiversity, wildlife, people and art. They need more and more work and appreciation. Now, can I do another presentation on, if you don't mind? So we're pretty much at the end of our session, but I think there's one thing that's very important to mention here. This is not the end of a campaign, this is the start of this campaign. And poster is the first output that we are bringing in, as Aditi said. And I would not say that this poster is complete, because this poster is based on the current information that we have on the ground. I mean, Satvik helped us a lot, so thank you, Satvik. But I think we need more information to enrich this effort. So the way we are kind of visualizing it is, let's say if you have a stakeholder's office like a DFO office, this poster could be there, but it needs a more detailed one to be relevant to that particular territory. And that's why we are also launching a sub-poster. Now this is work in progress, but I wanted to bring in because this is where we need inputs from you really. We need inputs on the first poster as well. I'm sure not everything is perfect and we can change things if possible, but this is very important. This is a sub-poster which is specific to a DFO territory. So what you see is a DFO territory and the territories which are around it with whom they have to work and interact to make this happen. This will have information on the famous tiger or related incidences in the area. What are the local pressure points? So maybe there are 4 pressure points that we showed in the main map. Here 2 are highlighted because the rest 2 don't exist or not as relevant for that particular corridor, right? What are the local tribes, and most importantly, contact information and little bit of blurb about the organizations which are working to make it happen. So we hope this will act as a starting point. There's a QR code, so more information about the paper and everything will be available, but this becomes a starting point which is relevant to a particular DFO territory or to a particular corridor. So we need your help in populating this information about what's happening here, what are the local tribes or any situation, who are the people who are working here, whoever you think needs to come into this poster, because this will be spread far and wide, please send them our way. So that's what we really need from you. And that's about it. I think we have covered. I'll open it up now for. Yes, so we have got copies, couple of copies of the poster, and the main chart will be pinning it outside. And we will have a chart paper which is blank. Hopefully, you will give your inputs about the poster and also more information about any particular territory or corridor that you want to bring in. And yes.
I just wanted to jump in and say for each of the corridors,
present in a way so that first you get to understand them. I mean, the situations that are happening, we can be dealt with that. So in order to get that attention, we do bring that point, and then because of the colors and because of all the forms and everything that we are showing in a way, is that hope that we are talking about. These are the things that were subdued, that were lost somewhere, and this is the hope we are talking about. So when we are talking of ancient wisdom, when we are talking about the sustainable methods and solutions that the tribals had, that they some of them still have. So we are thinking of reviving them. So that is the point. That is the area where we bring those spaces and we portray it on the poster, so that you question yourself, you get to the point, you ask who are these people, and then you get that hope. You build that hope instead of someone else trying to, so.